Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a dawah channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Hello everybody and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show this 21st of May 2021. Oh, there's two 21s today. Excellent. I hope you're going to enjoy it. Welcome to the panel. Welcome to Mr. Rob Speakers.
Good evening, everybody. Evening, Stops and Nick, and to all the viewers. And good evening from this wet United Kingdom.
Yeah, and here everything is cleared up again. I mean, there was a couple of, thunder blasts and then it just stopped. Now the sun's out again. Amazing. And welcome to the Nick of Time.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm happy to be sitting here in nice, warm, 31 degrees Celsius Toronto, listening to you guys.
And welcome to the chat. Welcome to the wonderful people who are just there for company, just there for a ride, who just want to listen to us talking about Islam, just to hear what we have to say about it. But like I said in the intro, please, if you have questions, if you have suggestions, come on in, just talk to us. It's not supposed to be just a one-way street. Okay, what we normally do is we start off with an inspirational slide, and today it's going to be no different. So indeed, I am near. This is something I found on an Islamic website, which is supposed to say that God is constantly watching over you. It's like a voyeur, checking you out all the time, never leaving you out of his sight, never leaving you in peace, always checking what you're up to.
Especially when you're in a dark alley, walking home in the middle of the night.
Into the what?
Especially if you're walking home alone in the middle of the night in a dark alley.
Well, how close is near, and how do we establish that, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny that whenever you need a God, it's not around. It's like Superman, who always comes to the rescue when there is nobody to be rescued or when somebody has already been damaged and he's too late. So I don't know how that works.
Yeah, or maybe it's like the Flash. They say, yep, here he is, but you can't see him. He's too fast. Yeah. But how close is near? If he's near, what is near? Near to me is an arm's length away. He's near like a different planet, a different galaxy, a different reality outside of this universe. What is near? And how do we establish that he is in fact there? And
That's
somebody might
respond. To see these.
Yeah, somebody might respond with, hey, look at the magnificence of everything. And then you sort of point out that it's not quite as magnificent as it could be. And they don't have the option of original sin and all that sort of stuff to get them out of this sort of quagmire that the Christians are in. Original sin is bad in and of itself, but since they don't have that, they can't appeal to that. So, what is it that they have that they can, appeal to say that this is the best possible world or the magnificence, when there's plenty of things that are less than optimal, to say the least.
Understatement, really. Wow. Anyway, that is just the inspiration of the week. The next segment is the news. And there's no news. Well, there's plenty, but we've decided we're not going to be talking about the news at the moment. We're just, and I'm saying this in the name of everybody, we're just very happy to see that there is finally a kind of a truce, weapons, I don't know what you want, standstill for some amount of time. Whether it's going to hold, we don't know. Yeah, but this is, I think it's questionable. I don't know if this is really going to work or not. And this ceasefire, yeah, this is probably the correct name. I don't like ceasefire. I don't know. Anyway, so with both countries defending each other, both countries declaring victory, I think everybody has an opinion. Everybody thinks they have something to say in this, but at the end of the day, I will leave it to everybody. There are facts, there are emotions, there's a lot of things going on here, so I don't think that we are in a position to talk about it, because then you would have to spend weeks explaining everything. What I do recommend is there's a Prague University video out there which gives you the facts of what has happened in the last 70 years. They are quite good at explaining who did what and when they lost the war, why Britain and France decided on this, and they give you a lot of historical background. So here, this is for once, normally PragerU is quite useless, but here I think they did quite a good job in explaining everything. The next segment is... So there we go, Krazy Komments. We have a lot today. So brace yourselves, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Strap yourselves in, and here we go with the first one. Muhammad Sharif, I don't know if you remember the guy from last week. I mean, he really does not disappoint. He really doesn't leave out anything. Yeah, I think there's another one or two. Nobel Prize is kuffar propaganda and unimportant. Not one Jew has won the more important King Faisal Award. In fact, Muslims dominate that list. Mashallah.
This is the same guy that did acknowledge. We should have got that quote up. Hey, that comment from the same guy that he acknowledged that the inheritance error looks like an error, and he's just waiting for the brothers to find some solution. But if there's no solution, then he would become an ex-Muslim, but he's in an eternal wait for a solution, if that makes sense. So if no solution comes, he'll keep waiting. But if a solution comes, then it's all good. So one of those sort of fellows that wants to make himself sound reasonable, but in fact is entirely unreasonable. At what point is he going to give up the hope that somebody's going to answer this error?
But he always has something to say.
Yes, no, he's very vocal, as we can see here.
Like this.
And what is the King Faisal Award? How many times you can pray, bow down and, bend your back? Or
I really don't know.
how many times you can say
this is him
or something?
Repeating what I told him. I said to him, please stop lying. Can't you be honest just for once in your life? Please, come on. Why are you not ashamed? Why? And then he says to me, be honest for once in your life. That's all I ask, please. That's exactly what I said to him. So he's just repeating it because that's all he has to say. So it must have somehow made, resonated, but not really. So, but
what gets me here is that he loved his own comment.
Yeah, because nobody else will. And he does this again. Lies again. Many female captives were extremely unattractive, yet the Muslims had to fulfill those ugly captive sexual desires. Imagine how difficult that would be, yet they persevered for the sake of Allah. So, if you want to use the word rape, which I don't, who is raping whom?
Oh my word.
This guy,
Can
are
you
this guy's
believe it?
parents siblings? What the hell is this comment?
Okay, so hang on. Let's just see if we can unpack this sentences of utter nonsense, if that's humanly possible. The fact that they were unattractive and yet the Muslims had to fulfill, what obligation was there on them to do this? What, they had to fulfill it because couldn't behave themselves and they were horny. It's not like
No,
these
they were
sexual
charitable.
captives, whether they were pretty or not pretty, whatever that might mean, asked for it or begged for it. So yes, it's rape, whether the person is physically attractive or not. But but unfortunately, somebody like this lives with us in the 21st century, and that's the more sort of sad part, isn't it? That this mentality would be, you know, unpleasant in the 7th century, at least if you were a woman or thinking clearly. But these days, you cohabit the earth with people that make these sort of comments, and that's the utterly baffling and very sad thing about it. And one wonders whether we'll eventually, they will get washed away, or whatever the case is, or whether we'll regress to more people thinking like this.
I'd
It
hate
hangs
how
in the
this.
balance.
I'd hate to have this guy around any female that is of significance to me, or any female in general, because he would have to fulfill some duties with them.
Rob beat me to it. I was just going to look at this.
Well, I
So
don't
the
think.
king
Well,
fights-
unless service to Islam is helping people to think critically, I don't think we're up for the award. But if it is helping people think critically, then I think we should be at least in the running for that award. But I suspect that wouldn't be the case. How dogmatically can you deny all critique and still believe it, even in the face of overwhelming evidence against your claim? Perhaps that's what the award is. In which case, they will have millions of potential people who could run for that particular award.
Yeah. The other thing is, somebody asked, is there a solution to the dogmatism in Islam? My answer to this is no, there isn't. You are so focused, so centered on the Quran. And yes, it is actually the recitation. In other words, it's an oral form of transmission, but it doesn't change it. It's still the Quran. And which version of the Quran you are reciting doesn't really matter. The gist of the message is going to remain more or less the same. There are going to be differences, there are going to be subtle differences, and some might even be major, where somebody is a Muslim or not a Muslim. Some of these variants are actually opposites and contradictions. But in general, it doesn't make that much difference in my eyes. So the dogmatism in Islam is part of Islam. I don't think you can somehow change it or alter or alleviate. I don't think you can. It's part and parcel of it. So here we see the effects. There you go. All right, then. Hang on, did we see this one? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's the matter. It's the matter between us Arabs, the Muslims, and Jews. I don't understand why third-class cowards converted of Indian subcontinent, especially Pakistan, are getting so crazy over it. Why are Pakistanis complaining about Muslims in the Gaza Strip chucking rockets into Israel? It should be the Arabs. I don't get this. I really do not get this. I think there are some Muslims who are saying don't do this or blah, blah, blah. And they are saying, no, we're supposed to be doing that. It's okay.
Yeah, and we have to send this comment to the neurology department of any med school just to show those kids that this person is brain dead, or this person.
Oh. It's absolutely amazing in my eyes.
Well, that guy's particularly bigoted, isn't it? Because it's only between the Arabs. Well, apparently, according to Muslims and perhaps the Quran, if we can find the verse, is that it's available to anyone who wants to believe in Allah and Muhammad as his last messenger, right? And take the Shahada. So if he's saying it's the Arabs, that sounds bigoted to me. But, as we know, Stops and Nick, there are some people that think that way, that the Arabs are superior to everybody else, even if they are Muslims. But this guy, I think, would get a lot of flack from at least some other Muslims who want to take the view that all Muslims are equal once they believe in Allah and Muhammad, right? So, but he seems particularly bigoted, at least.
Yeah, but it's not Muslims in Indonesia or South Africa or whatever. who are fighting against the Israelis in Israel. So I think what this refers to is the directly affected countries around Israel, where you have Hezbollah, which is being supported by Islam apparently, chucking rockets from the north and or from the northeast, and from the southwest you have the Gaza Strip being supported from, I don't know, from all over the world. So the countries involved are mainly the Arab countries, where I made a list, and I think there's like 10 or 12 Arab countries in this area which are involved in this. So from this point of view, I can understand it, because the people in Indonesia or Muslims in other countries like in Pakistan or India are not really involved. Not directly anyway. They're providing moral and financial support, but they're not directly suffering or something. So if the Israelis are firing back at Gaza Strip and, I don't know, well, they're not firing back no, they did, right? They did fire back into Lebanon as well. So those are the places that are affected, but not the Muslims in Indonesia. I think this is what this is going on about. This is a butte. This is the logical thinking that we are confronted with, and it's a pity that Mr. Mustafa is not here. When the car struck the atheist, the officer came to question him. Did you see the person who hit you with a car? The atheist says, no, I didn't see him. So the officer says, well, if you didn't see him, then he doesn't exist.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Oh dear. One could only hope that somebody like this, you could help them to think more clearly and to, help with the befuddled thinking here, as if this is supposed to be analogous with, not seeing God and therefore he doesn't exist type of thing. Again, you can see the level of sophistication, or in this case, the lack thereof, with this sort of muddled thinking. But he's not the only, this particular person is not the only one. We come across that, as you guys know, such a lot, where they try to make analogies and it fails miserably. And in my anecdotal view of having spoken to probably 400 or 500 Muslims, I guess, in the last 4 or 5 years, as soon as they bring up an analogy, then it's 99 times out of 100. And I'm probably being generous. I actually can't remember a single time that an analogy has actually been analogous and has been of substance to the argument, right? And an argument by analogy is really only there if somebody doesn't understand something, but then the analogy needs to map onto exactly what the point is that you're trying to make. It's there to help somebody who doesn't understand something. But these guys, unfortunately, it's virtually always disanalogous, and B, it's so poorly, and this is a prime example of being so poorly disanalogous, and the person not recognizing it, right? And then having emojis and all the rest of it there, as if they'd said something substantial. It's very sad, really. I think something like this. It's just not being aware of how mistaken they are. The Dunning-Kruger sort of effect. People with a very low level of ability in a particular field are much more confident because of their ignorance, which is kind of, you would think it's the other way around, but actually, as we know, ignorance breeds confidence and expertise breeds caution, and that's a mismatch, especially to lay people who don't know any better, and especially to the people who are doing whatever it is they're doing. And here's a perfect example. I apologize for the monologue there. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. The thing is that this is from, if you look carefully, you'll see this is October 23rd from 2019. Now, this is from a group where I joined in, I think, 2017 or something. And I challenged them because this is a group which says we are challenging all atheists. And I said, oh, great, I'm an atheist, challenge me. And then after a couple of weeks, they fired me because they couldn't handle it. And now I bumped into them, because if you go through a different account, of course, you can still see this. I cannot see them as Stop Spamming because I'm blocked there. But from a different account, you can still see them. So I wanted to see if it's worth recommending them to you, anyone, if you want to pay them a visit, but it's not. It's almost dead. So their sort of challenge to atheists has backfired, and now there's no more action. And this is one of the later posts or comments or something that I found, and this is from October 2019. So they're basically dead, so it's not worth even going there anymore. So these are now from Mustafa. Now the thing is that he is very generous with his Zoom. I don't know if I can... No, this actually works.
Yeah, that looks pretty good.
Yeah, because you need to go to the top. If you go to the bottom, then it doesn't zoom properly. So it says, it's a pity he's not here to read it because he's better at it. Is it due to lack of religious beliefs? In other words, atheism? Why government is not doing anything? Why such immoral contents are allowed? Many movies and porn sites are showing unhealthy and immoral relationship between father and daughter, brother and sister, mother and son. Now, there's two things I just quickly want to say before you guys go. Number one, they don't. They're just pretending as though, all right? The second thing is, who are you to complain about this? You're sitting in the glass house. Islam is based on incest. You cannot not have incest if you want to take the human creation story from the beginning through Adam and Eve. You must necessarily have incest. And incest is built in because you still have family connections. You're allowed to have sex with your cousin and marry them, and this is leading to all sorts of problems. So Islam is based on incest and continues to have incest in the text. It's still allowed today. So I would not be going out and complaining about things like that.
I got a really serious question. What's this guy doing on porn sites? Isn't it immoral? How does he know
he's heard about this? You see, this is hearsay. Somebody came and told him. Actually, you're raising a good point. Are you going to elaborate?
Yeah, no, like my main point is like, what are him and his friends doing discussing porn? Like, it's,
okay. Why we know this is because there are statistics. So Google Statistics gives you all sorts of data, and if you go and you ask them, what country are most of the searches for unhealthy porn, let's call it that, and this is like about bestiality and father, son, and things like that, and they're actually from Pakistan. So and then I don't know what the second ranked is. I can't remember. But if you do searches like these, so this is quite weird. So what Nick is referring to is that there are a lot of searches coming from the Muslim community when it comes to pornography of the more extreme kind.
Yeah, and then it also bothers me, like, they have a problem with acting. Like, it's like saying, why did this person murder another person in this movie? And why is this person alive in another movie when he died in this movie? Like, it's acting. Obviously, it's bad, and they're trying to show you it's bad. But like, how are they going to sit there and narrate what they did? Like, it's like one of those like read along raps, or they do without music. Like this, they got to show you what it is and why it's bad. And obviously, that's what they're showing in movies. And then in porn, it's like it's porn. Like,
well, there was a guy who was discussing this in an interview, and he was talking about Sarah, saying that when he acted as a gay, he must be a gay. He really believed this. He really said, you cannot tell me that you can act as a gay if you are not. So he must be. So for him, this was bad. I don't know why.
Well, yeah, Bryan Cranston acted as a paraplegic in in that movie with Kevin Hart, but that doesn't make him paraplegic.
And Tom Hanks acted as, and so on and so forth. Yeah, exactly. But it's crazy. Rob, you want to say something about this?
No, I think you guys have covered it there.
It's beneath you, I know. Just checking it. This is silly, but... Okay, Mustafa, do we reject... Okay, this is all the way out. Do we reject Joe Biden being US president just because the other 99 made false claim? The ignorance will not only offend Americans, but any human. So I think what is happening here is he's saying, should we reject Allah just because the other 99 gods were all false gods? doesn't. This is what Rob was talking about earlier. If you bring an analogy, it's somehow, I don't know why it doesn't work. It simply does not work.
Yeah, it's poor English. I was trying to work out what he's trying to say there. Yeah, I mean, it's just silly. Move on. That's a terrible one.
Okay. Oh my God. Who can shout this?
They are one, not your allies or friends. Muslims, you would had understood if you all had really paid attention to the Quran. Your countries would not be in ruins, nor are you running around seeking refuge in their occupied lands.
There you have it. You need more Islam to solve all the problems. This is what we heard, and this is the way that it works. This is really the belief that they have, that the more Islam you have, the better for the planet.
Yeah, but they can't establish what this more Islam is supposed to look like and why it's better. But they'll claim it anyway. So it's one of those sort of vacuous claims. Yes, it's better. We need more of it. In what sense and why? How did you establish that it's better? And obviously, for those who didn't know, I had a conversation this week past. It's on the Speakers Corner UK channel with a fellow that was on last Friday, and we didn't sort of get any sort of substantive answer to this. He basically put forward a Marxist socialist sort of idea that's somehow tied to Islam, but couldn't really substantiate it in any way. So, but it's the same with any of the other guys trying to claim the same thing. They'll want to claim that it's an objective standard. They don't know what objective means or how they could establish that it's in fact a good standard. But they will repeat it because they hear other Muslims saying it. So I guess, and that's of course what they're taught, right? Repeat what you hear from other people, because if enough people repeat something, then it's likely to be true. That's the kind of thinking that appears to be the case, at least for the vast numbers of Muslims. If I have any anecdotal experience which I can then extrapolate out, which seems to be the case.
Well, the funny thing is, if you compare the facts with what he is claiming, there's a discrepancy here, because the countries in ruins, I think, are more the Islamic Muslim majority countries than the countries that always hit the top spots in the satisfactions and the worthwhile and sort of other categories like that.
Or you just claim, like Muji did, that there's no Islamic country, no proper Islamic country, at least.
For some reason,
so
which I don't
they've all got
understand.
it wrong, and they've got it wrong for 1400 odd years, except for Muhammad, kind of. So that we're still waiting for this perfect Muslim country, or at least close to perfect example. And maybe it's somewhere in Albania with some guy that's telling people to pray for him, even though praying to God doesn't help, because humans have got to do the work and God's going to just watch anyway. So it doesn't look good from where I'm sitting.
Okay, what is this? Can I Okay, just to let you all know, all this garbage being thrown on Islam, organized by the patrons of Israel. They just proved it. Okay. And on top here, it says all this Islamophobia here and all these Islam mocking memes, articles, propaganda. They can't handle this mocking thing. I don't know. You can tell them all sorts of nonsense or all sorts of things, and they will just shrug it off. But as soon as you start mocking, then there seems to be something that is built into them that they reject this mocking thing and they react to this in some way.
Well, they've been told to, right? They've been brought up believing that mocking is a bad thing, and especially for something that's supposed to be true, which they can't demonstrate. And so, they haven't really evolved a psychological disposition to deal with that in a more effective way. So it's kind of the victim mentality and so forth, and stamp your feet and hope that works. And unfortunately, it does for a few people who don't think clearly or who want to be friends with everybody. But it's self-defeating, right? Because when you open the Quran, it just mocks all of our credulity. And so by that, that measure, we should stop talking about it, reading it, or indeed anything else. And so the Quran is like the memes, but it just takes itself seriously, whereas the memes don't necessarily do that. So, if you held a standard, consistent standard, you have to apply the same to the Quran. It's certainly, what's the word? If one chose to be, you could be offended by its, by its attempt at saying that it's saying something substantial and rational and so forth, and it strains our credulity. So kind of like
Yeah,
their
but
review of the means.
why is it that Muslims are very keen to mock this 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 1? And they are saying this Trinity idea is really silly and it doesn't make sense because how can a God be this and this? So here they are quite happy to mock others. But when I say, listen, you can't have talking ants and slapping a corpse with a stake will not really revive it. Then they get offended. Then they say, no, you're not allowed to mock us. And I'm asking, why? Why are you allowed to mock others and I'm not allowed to mock the really silly things about what the Quran says?
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of things in there that strain credulity, to put it mildly.
Same guy. Since 2001, West and Israel. I don't know what West and Israel means, but after Islam. I don't know if he really means after Islam or behind or something. I don't know what he means here. Muhammad and Muslims are after Islam, Muhammad and Muslims. Oh, there you go. So I think he means that we are going after these, after Islam, Muhammad, Muslim, only for the reason that it's a threat to Western imperialism. Yeah, let's have Islamic imperialism, which is much better than our imperialism. Yeah.
Well, the threat is only, if you want to call it a threat, the only threat that's there is if the birth rate continues and we don't educate people into critical thinking and embracing new ideas. Then, if everybody stayed still and everybody else stopped having children and Muslims just bred uncontrollably and didn't update their ideas, then I suppose there could be a threat, because eventually they'll just be in the majority. It would take 100, 200 years, whatever it might be, but that could be the case conceivably if nothing else happened. Hopefully, though, they are influenced by the Western ideas, and at least some of them are starting to learn to think critically and questioning things and so forth. And the internet is another big driver in that. But if everything stayed static, then potentially that could be a threat in the future at some point. Let's move on from this guy. Stop. Is there anything else besides this guy?
Islamophobia is far more dangerous than COVID has destroyed millions of lives already. Is this? No, this is a different guy.
Same guy.
All this here is so much fun, right? But when same gets offered in heavens, see how these gay right and human right shouting atheists, Judeo-Christian powers make long faces just because it's mentioned in Quran. They think God is Pope and heaven's like Vatican. Okay, Mustafa, this is
struggling with the brain to try and
this is just silly.
Make this into a coherent sentence.
Yeah, no, I'm dyslexic, and even I can make a better sentence than this guy.
So I think the message here is, if you see nice palm trees and nice beach and the ocean, then we consider this to be nice. And if we see this, or we consider this to be nice here on earth, this is what heaven looks like. That's exactly what heaven looks like. So this is what he thinks we should do, go to heaven. And okay, I don't get it. Anyway. What comes after the crazy comments?
It's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
The Koran Korner. What we're going to be talking about is the next couple of sentences in the condensed version of the Quran, which is where I go and I take some sentences, and I've just loaded the wrong one. Okay, that's cool. And I go and I take the essence of a sentence from the Quran, and I go and I say, this is what it actually says in the short form. In other words, if this Quran uses 3 sentences to go and say it's raining outside, my condensed version will be it's raining outside, and not the 3 sentences that the Quran uses. So this is the only difference. Now, because I'm a human being, I can make mistakes. So if I do, please correct me. So what I am doing, I'm on chapter 10, and we've done the previous 70 sentences in chapter 10. 68 says everything belongs to Allah. Well, okay, this is a claim. And they said he had a son. Well, that's the essence of what it says in that sentence, and don't bullshit. And if you do, you lose. And they will return to us, and we will punish blasphemers severely with our mercy, of course. And then we have a whole segment now in chapter 10, sentence number 71, the news about Noah, who said, now Noah, by the way, was a guy who was also 950 years old, all right? So I think this follows the Bible. I'm not sure how old he was in the Bible, but in the Quran, he's quite a, I don't know, he's retired. He should be at the age of 950. So the news about Noah, who said to his people they should do what they must. So that's a good statement. And you will bear the consequences. Yeah, okay. The only thing is I don't understand the grammar. I don't understand the news about Noah, who said to his people, you will bear the consequences. They should do, you will bear. So this is inconsistent in the grammar applied here. Then it says, we drowned them. Now, I don't know who we is and who them is. We, I suppose, is the singular Allah, using the royal plural. And them is, we don't know who them is. Now, the funny thing is, a lot of Muslims will claim that the flood in the Quran is local. But then if the flood is local, why would he drown them, all of them? And there are several instances in the Quran which indicate that this was not a local flood, because a local flood will not cover the mountains, the hills, the everything. So it will not drown all these people. Anyway, he said, we saved Noah and his shipmates. So it doesn't, specify anything. It doesn't say who the shipmates are. It doesn't say what animals were there. It doesn't say anything about in pairs. It doesn't say who Noah took on his boat. And maybe the shipmates were not even animals. Maybe his shipmates were, 150 people or something. But there are other sentences which again say it's Noah and his immediate family, and that's it. And even one of the sons said no, and he drowned. And there's funny stories there. This is the inconsistency in the Quran. So there's not one passage where we have the story of Noah and all the information about Noah is, sort of concentrated in this one passage. No, it's all over the Quran. It's as though several people wrote it and everybody wanted to have their say on this, and this is why we find Noah in different parts. And then sentence 74, after him we sent messengers with proof, which was rejected. So we sealed their hearts. So in other words, you bring people who provide you with evidence that something or other is true, but this is rejected, and because it is rejected, then you shut down the brain, so that which is rejected will definitely be rejected, and they can't even think about it. So for me, this is quite silly. Instead of saying, well, the people who rejected, those are the ones who definitely need an open heart. Well, in other words, this is the, whatever metaphorical description of the brain, the heart. Those are the people who really need to use their brain to ponder over what they are rejecting, to be given a second chance. Those are the ones who are shut down. So I think this is the opposite of what I would do as a God.
And what are these clear proofs?
With clear proofs. So then we sent Moses and Aaron. Now these are brothers, okay? I don't know if you remember. I don't even know if we came across this anachronism, because it says that Jesus is the son of Mary, and Mary is the sister of Moses and Aaron, and the daughter of Imran, who is the father of Moses, Aaron, and Mary. But they mixed up the Marys, because there is a Mary, but this is not the same Mary that is the mother of Jesus, but the people who mixed up the stories didn't quite get it. This is where's Thunder today? He loves these kind of things, and he gets quite cross with them that they even get the basics wrong. But it is quite funny. So these two guys go to Pharaoh, Now, another thing that I need to point this out every single time, because this is one of the big things in my eyes. Because the Quran copies, it simply, I don't know, it duplicates the mistake in the Bible. Because in the Bible, they think that this is a name. Because if you go and you substitute Pharaoh with, I don't know, Mike or Peter, Andy or whatever, then you will see that this is treated like a name. Then it makes sense. We sent Moses to Mike. Makes sense. If we say we sent Moses to king, it doesn't make sense. Because it needs to be the king. And this is not being used. So Pharaoh is being used as a name. And we don't know which name this is. And so this is just a plain, simple mistake. To this guy and his chiefs, who were arrogant. And they were arrogant because they called truth magic. And then it said in 77, it says, Moses said, you call truth magic, but magicians will fail because his God is now going to jump in and help him. So they accused Moses of selfishness and said they didn't want to change their heritage because they have a heritage of magicians. I don't know how this works. And then this Mike guy, this Pharaoh, ordered the magicians to gather from all over the country, and they did, and they challenged Moses. Moses replied that Allah will countermand their magic and show truth using words, but they will not use words. So this is just a false claim. And then in 83 it says Pharaoh was a tyrant, so everyone rejected what Moses said. I don't know if this makes sense, but anyway, this is what the Quran says. So it must make sense because it's a God who wrote this.
Yeah. Stop. So I got a quick question at this point as well, right? When we're talking about Moses, we're talking about Ramses II.
Well, we don't know.
Right? I'm assuming because it's supposed, like from what I remember, it's supposed to be Ramses II, or where the tale originally came from. But like he was also known in the Egyptian culture as one of the most powerful but also benevolent kings out there as well. And many of the stories that were made against him were against people that he actually beat in battle.
Well, the thing is that nobody really knows whether this is Ramses II or not. If you go and follow along what is being claimed, it can't only be one. I mean, Ramses II was the oldest and the longest serving king in history. Okay, cool. But he couldn't have survived that long. Because remember when Moses, when he was already Pharaoh when Moses came along as a baby.
Yeah.
So then this is not really possible. This is why then some people say, well, there must have been two of the pharaohs involved, so it must have been Ramses II and his son Remta. So we're talking about two, but nobody really knows because this is based on the assumptions, on the assumption that the stories in the Bible are correct. But Muslims reject the stories in the Bible because they're saying they have been altered by human beings. So how are you going to, square the circle here? Because you can't really go and say, well, the Bible is correct because that is where we take the data from. And then at the same time say, well, the Bible has been corrupted by humans. And this is why we need to totally reject the Bible, the contents of the Bible. But this is the only way that you can get to any kind of timing of Joseph, of Moses, of all these guys. And even that, I mean, there's no evidence for their existence. So this is just a fairy tale. So what you're actually doing is saying, well, Cinderella existed sometime around in the 5th century or something, because they must have had shoes and they must have had horses and things like that and castles. So it must have been sometime around then. But that's the only thing that you're doing. You're taking a fairy tale and taking some, bits and pieces and saying, well, this could sort of work in this and this century. But that's all you have. So it's quite weird. So Moses said they should believe and be Muslims. And they accepted and prayed. So we told Moses to settle down, build houses facing the Qibla. Now this is something that you find in the Quran which does not make any sense, because you can't build a house facing the Qibla. So the Qibla is a little niche that indicates the direction towards Mecca, where the initial mosque didn't have this, and we're not facing Mecca either. So this is quite weird. So Moses tells people in Egypt, now remember these are Jews, and they should settle down, build houses facing the Qibla for prayer. But they in those days said, well, no, we're going to go and face Jerusalem, which is our holy town, and things like that. So I don't know. This is all very weird. Then Moses told Allah to harden the hearts of Pharaoh. And if Moses can tell Allah how many prayers to accept, because remember, Muhammad went up to Allah on his flying donkey, and then sort of haggled with him and said, Allah said, well, you need to pray 50 times. And then Muhammad went down again. Moses said, nah, come on, you can't do that to your people. Go back upstairs and talk to the old man. He did, and then he brought it down to 40, 30, 20, and then eventually arrived at 5. And then Moses is the one who says, okay, this is good enough. So Moses tells Allah what to do, how many prayers are adequate for Muslims. And because Moses said this, this is why Muslims today pray 5 times a day, because Moses said so. Can you handle this? Anyway, so Moses tells Allah what to do to harden the hearts of Pharaoh and his people and destroy them. So, and Allah did. Isn't that nice to have somebody who can tell a God what to do and the God does? I think it's brilliant. Then in sentence 90, we took the Jews across the sea, drowned Pharaoh and his people. Well, they didn't, because in another story it says Pharaoh was not drowned. And his last words were, there is only the God of the Jews and I'm a Muslim. Now, can somebody make sense out of this?
Which verse is that?
90.
Just looking at
So we
it.
took the Jews across the sea, drowned Pharaoh, which he didn't, and his people, well, we didn't, it was just a bit of, some army people. And his last words were, there is only the God of the Jews and I'm a Muslim. I'm sorry, this does not make sense to me at all.
Oh, so okay, so it seems to be that, as soon as he saw this, this flood and so forth, and he was about to die, then he kind of accepted that this God was real and he wanted to submit.
Yeah, but how can he say that I'm the God of the Jews and I'm a Muslim?
Well, because that God is supposed to be the same God. Remember, this is from their point of view.
But wouldn't he be called Yahweh?
So they're retelling the story from their perspective.
So it's not Yahweh, but Allah. No, sorry, it's not Allah, but Yahweh. So they're very flexible.
Yeah, well, it's all Allah from the beginning onwards, according to them. So they've just overridden, Judaism and Christianity and called it all Allah to try and make it fit in, right? So they shoehorned it all in.
Okay, all right then. Yeah, okay. Under that premise, it works. Yeah.
Like back to Abraham and even Eve, Adam and Eve, and so forth. So they've just kind of blotted out that part of it and inserted this and just try to make a way for this all to fit together.
Yeah, but they say that the God of the Jews has a son, Ezra.
Yeah, we'd have to bring that up again, isn't it? I don't quite know how that fits in.
So this is quite weird. Okay, so 91, and now Allah says, now, after all you've done, do you think I'm going to accept you, that now in the last moment you suddenly say, and then he says, okay, we'll save you in your body as a sign. Now, he drowns Pharaoh, and then he says he's going to save him. Now that is, for me, is a direct contradiction, because you can't drown somebody and save them. Well, I guess if you're a god, you can, but...
Well, presumably he means save the body, as in like, this is a sign, but that's a terrible sign anyway, because you can't establish that it was that Pharaoh, who it was, etc., etc. I mean, if that's the best sign he could do, no wonder most people don't believe in it. He's got a very low standard for signs then, unfortunately. But that's typical of the Quran and the supposed Allah, right? Because if he had good signs, we'd all be just stunned by the magnificence of, all of his signs, and instead we are just left shaking our heads in utter disbelief that this is supposed to be a sign, because the standard is so low that you're liable to trip over it, and yet Muslims are still able to crawl underneath it and call it a standard. So it's fascinating.
Yeah, and this is being brought up as one of the things that is absolutely correct in the Quran. But unfortunately, saving somebody in a body is not the same as a
Preserving the
mummy.
body, yeah.
A
Well,
mummy is
somehow
not a
preserving
body.
it, whatever the case. But yeah, as you pointed out many times, Stops, you can't demonstrate that whichever body it is the body that they're talking to, because they've got a name. They're trying to now match it with a Bible and so forth, but you can't establish which pharaoh it was. That seems to be very difficult, if not impossible, to do. And it certainly doesn't seem like when I looked at it and when you reminded me that it was a body that was drowned or whatever the case was either. And so, but I think they do claim that it's got salt or it's got something, doesn't it? Something that they want to claim is likely to show that.
This is Bouquet who made that claim. He says you can see that he drowned because he has salt in the cavity. But that's rubbish. The problem is that it's not a body because it's missing everything inside. So it's just the outer shell and not a body. And the salt is just the residue that they were using because they were using a natrium chloride solution to wash out the inside to stop it from rotting. And this is what you see is the white residue of the salt. So that's it.
Yeah, but if you can
so-
retrofit it, right, to make it fit,
Yeah,
then it sounds good to
exactly.
gullible ears, right? So if you're somebody that doesn't think about it, a researcher or whatever, and you can come up with a different hypothesis, and you take it for granted that most of the people who listen will just repeat the claim and not look into it, well then, that's why I always say, right, they've got such an easy audience. It's like Darren Brown hypnotizing an audience and they just go along with whatever's being said. If it was an audience like us, then they wouldn't have any followers. But sadly, it's not. It's more like a hypnotized audience that just repeats everything because that's what they've been taught to do from a young age. So if you get the mind into that mindset of repeat what's being told to you without questioning it, then that continues when you get older because it's already been set in your mind as the way to behave from a very young age.
Yep. Okay, so that was my lot for the Koran Korner. Let me just mark this as done before I close it so that I don't forget this next time. That means I will have to do some homework again next time. Ah, rats. Okay. So, what is up next? Up next, oh, this is quite neat. It's almost 9 o'clock, so this is perfect timing. So what we're going to do today is we're going to be looking at a video which was postponed from last week. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at, what's his name, Shamsi, who came and made some wonderful, beautiful claims. And we're going to take a listen in and see what we can find. And as usual, if anybody has a question, just put one enter to catch our attention and we'll stop. Or otherwise, Nick or I will just shout stop if we want to make a comment.
Yeah, go ahead and do that because I won't be looking at comments or see the StreamYard back end at the moment. I'm looking only at the video because I don't have my other screen at the moment. I'm in a different location. So I'll be looking at the video and start and stop it. So either of you guys just shout stop, and I'll stop it, or I'll, if it's a place where I didn't stop myself. So
and
without
thinking
further
clearly,
ado,
this is exactly what we're doing. Which boy wants to be a Muslim? The boy that you're going to see in the video now.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the comments for you guys if you want, and if anyone has any questions, I'll notify you.
Okay, just say it out loud because remember I won't be looking at it. So, all right,
yeah.
Here we go. Hopefully you'll be able to hear this, and here it starts.
So David, we know that this creation is being created for a purpose, correct?
Yeah.
The fact that
Whoa, already 10 seconds in. This creation has been created for a purpose. That's your claim. How do you demonstrate that's true? And unfortunately, David, because we just heard his name there, he looks under 20 at least, just says, yeah. So that's the first claim that one would have to ask them to substantiate. Why is it that you claim that this creation has a purpose? How did you establish that's the case? Because if it has a purpose, then presumably the next step is, well, obviously there's something that gave it a purpose, a particular purpose, like you have in the world around us. But we don't just accept that claim as our dear David did there.
That we can analyze that the Creator has wisdom. And for example, we have a nose next to our mouth. Before you eat, what you smell food. So the fact that the Creator put a nose next to your
Okay, so he's saying, and we'll bring up a good one here. So this is a wonderful, we're wonderfully created because our nose is next to our mouth, so we can smell food when we eat it. Now, to quote the late great Robin Williams, if you're going to go that route, then you'd have to point out that the Creator did a very poor job of putting a recreation plant, a recreation area next to a sewage plant, which of course is the genitalia next to each other. So that, if you're going to claim that that's great, well then by your standards, we have to conclude that the genitalia and the sewage release system of human beings are next to each other, and that's not a good design. But we could also go further, and this is endless. This is like just candy to a kid, really. We could say, well, why would you need food? Why not be like Superman? Why didn't he create us such that all we needed is sunlight? Then we wouldn't impact the rest of the earth, killing animals, deforesting, the world, etc. And we could live totally on sunlight and just, be in awe of everything around us. Why not that? So this idea that we've been created, perfectly just so easily falls to reductio ad absurdum, ad infinitum, if you like. There's so many of these that we could bring up to counter this rather silly claim.
Your mouth that indicates wise. If your nose was next to your anal, it'd be crazy, innit? It sounds a bit funny, but it's mad, We have a joint at our elbows. Imagine we never had a joint, you would never be able to eat. Rather, you start eating like animals. So the fact that the Creator put a joint at our elbows indicates is wise. Likewise, we have the teeth in our mouth. Why? Because we chew with our mouth. You know what I'm saying?
And as I say, all of this stuff could be avoided if we just had sunlight that powered us like Superman. We wouldn't need teeth. We wouldn't have to hurt animals or, plow the land. And, our survival would not depend on, all this fuel. And when you do eat food and so forth, it's converted into energy. But the conversion process is nowhere near optimal anyway. And so you've got to crap out a lot of this stuff. And so it's exactly what we would expect in an evolutionary system where, we're nowhere near optimal, but this is the sort of standard to have, right? The suboptimal, and they'll cherry pick a couple of ideas. But as I say, all you need to do is provide a multitude of other examples that shows how suboptimal the supposed design is.
Yeah. Also, Rob, I wanted to point out quickly at this point, what would his arguments be to essentially say that there are other species of humans who existed, like the Homo erectus, I believe, which is the longest living human species to have ever existed, but had clear evolutionary deficiencies, even though they were not successful in living?
I don't know what he would say, whether he would accept those or whether he would say that's just a myth or we can't prove it. No idea. It's hard to speculate with these guys because sometimes they come up with such crazy ideas that I can't even think sometimes of what they might say. So I'm not sure what they would say on that one.
The thing is, I handle these things with humor. I wouldn't know how else to handle this. I just fell off my chair. I mean, come on. There's a yellow bucket there. That means if this yellow bucket would not be there, it wouldn't be there, and therefore Allah must exist because there's a yellow bucket there. So what is this? What kind of a claim is this? Well, you have fingertips, and because your fingertips are there, that means that Allah is there. You can say anything. And I can make the same claim when I say, well, there's a yellow bucket there, that means Allah does not exist. It's the same level of stupidity.
Yeah, I think what they're trying to do, obviously, Stops, is point out, that we're so optimally created, and this couldn't have happened by chance or through natural processes. But clearly, we're nowhere near optimally created in any sense that you could possibly imagine. The challenge for a Muslim is give me the thing that you think we are most optimally designed for, and I'll show you that it could be way better. Anything you like. Give me any single thing you can possibly think of, and I'll show you how it could be better. And if you concede that that's the case, then your argument falls. And you could do it with anything. So the challenge is open. Whatever you think we're optimal for, bring it to me, and I'll show you that it's better. There's something that we could do that's better.
But what I like doing,
That's what
and
Allah
this makes them cringe for some odd reason, I always tell them that my penis is too small and my wife's boobs are too small as well. So, so we could have
Yeah, speaking on
improved
that, yes, Doc, speaking on that specific point, like I think Thinking Clearly made a comment as well. If I was designing the genitalia area, I would have put the testes behind a protective layer of bone thicker than the creation of the skull. Like,
Yeah, you just wouldn't have testes, right? Or you'd have it in some other way that's protected, that couldn't get hurt, or you couldn't feel pain, or whatever the case is, instead of it being gonads that likely came from a fish billions of years ago.
yeah, but they need to be outside the body to function. This is the problem. There's an evolutionary reason behind this because the female is very well capable of producing eggs inside the body, but the gonads of the male are not capable of doing that unless they are a couple of degrees colder. That's why they need to be outside the body, outside the torso. So this is actually a design failure.
Yeah, yeah.
Allah in the Quran. Allah said, as an Arabic and translate it, yeah? Allah said, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah said, within the creations of the heavens and the earth, and that which is between them, and the alteration of the day and the night, it is a sign for people of understanding, people of a sound intellect. Okay? So, when you analyze...
What is the sign supposed to be? He's pointing out trivial things and saying it's a sign. It's like me looking outside, saying, look, everything's green. That's a sign of God. Or could it have been purple or pink or some other color? No, it had to be green. How did you establish that? Right, and then they're going to point to science and go, right, so it's got nothing to do with other. Then you're pointing out a naturalistic reason why something is green. But these are just trivial statements. But they make it sound, and he's looking up at the sky there, making it sound as if this is magnificent, but it's utterly trivial. He hasn't actually said anything that's substantial at the moment. Look at everything. Look how wonderful it is. Well, how do we know it's wonderful? Well, just look at it. Oh, great, fantastic.
And reflect upon the creation, you know there is a purpose of life. But who knows our purpose except who? The Creator.
Well, that's begging the question, isn't it? You haven't established there's a purpose. And if there were a purpose, how do you establish what that purpose is and whether there could have been a different purpose, and indeed whether it's your Creator that created it? How did you establish any of those? You didn't. You just sidestepped all of that. And our lovely David there smiles and just nods along, because I think he's hypnotized at this moment in time. I don't think there's any thinking going on here. And this sounds good to the ear for somebody who hasn't learned to think. And so all of these sort of things just bypass. And at this point, Shamsi could basically say almost anything. I think David will just nod along here probably.
And this comment has just been deleted by YouTube. I just realized this.
Sorry, I can't see what's happening there.
No, it's just, I see this from time to time, that YouTube just seems to arbitrarily just remove comments if they don't like something.
They've got an algorithm running, yeah.
And this is so silly.
For example, David, let me get you. Now, imagine you never came across a car. The first time you see a car, if you want to know what is the purpose for this car to be made, who you should ask? The Creator. That's a logical argument. You see what I'm saying? Likewise, a microwave, anything. Okay,
so this is a common false equivalence that people who are not sophisticated. You won't hear this from I say that, you probably might, but you'd certainly hear it a bit more sophisticated than this. But this is kind of like Paley's watchmaker analogy. You're walking along a beach, you see a watch, you would conclude that this isn't something that's just naturally occurring. This must have had a designer. That's the sort of idea here. So he's using car, whatever the case is. But how do you know that? And when you are, there's a couple of ways you could answer this. Right? One is that you have prior background knowledge, you have experience of these things. But the bigger way, and the way that I ask these guys, is if you were walking along a beach, or you were walking along the moon and you came across like a phaser from Star Trek, for example, you'd likely conclude that it's not natural. But how would you do that? Because you've got no background information for that. So what certainly what I would do, and I suspect that most people would, subconsciously they would compare it to what's naturally occurring. The chances of this being set up in this particular way, being able to have this sort of outcome there, is very unlikely from a naturalistic point of view. Not impossible, but highly unlikely given what we understand. And so it's likely that something else is going on here. But that's not the case with the world around us, because in order to do that, we'd have to contrast this universe with the universe that wasn't created. And the question you could always ask, and this just baffles minds like this, if you had to ask Shamsi or any other Muslim, basically, they'd sit there and this would be like a head scratcher. Ask them the question, what would an undesigned universe look like? And they might try, if they had enough time, they might go, oh, well, it would be entirely random or whatever the case is. But I don't think they can even conceive of what an undesigned universe looks like, because that would be the analogy. We'd have to contrast this universe with an undesigned one if we came across something that we didn't know before. But if it's something we already know about, then we have background information. We don't need to run that way. But either way, this is not a good argument for them. So the fact that he's doing this is obviously, even if I explained this to Shamsi, I don't know that he would have the cognitive ability to recognize how bad this analogy is. Because I have done it with other Muslims as well, and I'm not sure that it's ever sort of penetrated as to why. Maybe I'm not explaining it that well. Maybe they just closed off to it. I don't know. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, and I would have to ask if we would have to go to a microwave engineer or whatever engineer that actually makes this product. He made a product as inefficient as we are and took close to millions of years to get us to what we are right now. I'd have to ask him, why did it take so goddamn long? And you can just go snap and make a good.
Yeah, I mean, you could always ask that as well. Yeah.
So therefore, we know, generally speaking, there's a purpose. That's why, based upon the Creator's wisdom and His mercy, He chose people amongst us, from human beings, from our kind, to teach us about our purpose. But again, many people can claim to be what? Messengers of God, but they are liars. So based upon God's wisdom and mercy and justice, when He chose people amongst us, our kind, He gave them something that differentiated from the rest of the people. In order for you and I to differentiate between a true prophet and a false prophet. You know, for example, if I'm a king and I want to send my ambassador to another king, I will give to my ambassador a criteria or something that distinguish him from all the false ambassadors.
What would that be? So if we use your, again, probably disanalogous analogy, what could you say to the ambassador that I, as a layperson, couldn't copy or say to an ambassador, or have somebody look the same, dress up and go along there and say that I'm King Rob from Nebuchadnezzar land? What could you do to differentiate that? How would you know the difference? If that king got there and my guy was as equally well trained as your guy, how would you know the difference? You wouldn't, right? You'd need some other evidence, not just the ambassador saying so. And of course, that's presumably what he's going to attempt to do here, is give us something miraculous or amazing that nobody else could do except Muhammad. And we'll see if he does that, in fact, how well that goes, because I can't actually remember.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out here quickly is that it's been 2 minutes, 25 seconds, and that poor kid has not said a word. Not even a yes or no.
He's just listening, right?
Yeah, but there's not even an opportunity to say yes or no. This guy on the left here, we don't even know if he's like listening or like reading body language to understand if the kid even understands it.
No, but this is preaching, right? This is preaching to somebody, and this is why this video is up, because the fellow on the right is just not challenging anything that's being said there, right? He's probably not used to it. He's just walked past and now he's heard this guy, and they're quite well practiced in their little script. As long as the people don't challenge them, then they can run for half an hour, saying what they're saying. And it sounds appealing to the gullible ear, and even to the ear that hasn't heard this before, because you might not know how to, respond to this. And so rather than sound foolish or whatever the case is, you might just keep quiet and just nod, and that's seemingly what's going on here.
To know, yes, he's my ambassador. What about the king of the kings, the all-wise, the creator? So what is the criteria? The criteria that when God chose prophets and messengers, it is known He chose only those who are known amongst their nation to be trustworthy, truthful, honest. Okay. Likewise, He gave them like something which is supernatural, something which human cannot do. For example, to miracles, to prophesy about the future. So, you know about Jesus, Moses, Abraham. What I have to do, logically speaking, if I establish Muhammad is a true prophet, logic dictates we should believe what he came with. Logical? Yeah. For example,
I got a quick question here, if you can pause. So, On the point where he mentions like someone who is a true prophet is someone who's outside of borders and can clearly perform miracles. Why are we not praying to David Blaine right now?
That's the question you'd ask him. Presumably, he would say, "Well, those we know that's just tricks, but Muhammad wasn't tricks. It's something that no human could do," because that's what he just said there, right? So he wants to make the claim that whatever was given to these prophets to demonstrate they were prophets was just so supernatural, so extraordinary that no human could do it. And then, of course, the question is, okay, so you've made an extraordinary claim. Let's listen to the extraordinary reasoning and evidence that would support your claim. And will he do that here at all? Right, so they can dismiss anybody else as just saying, well, that's magic. Well, how do you know? Because other humans can do it, but no other human can do what Muhammad did. That's how they'd probably answer that. But then the question is, okay, so demonstrate what's so extraordinary, right? Because the bar's got to be set very high for this. It's going to be something that's just going to, for any reasonable thinking, critically thinking person, it's just going to be extraordinary. The evidence is going to be there, and we are just going to be wowed by this and just go, well. Ultimately, it comes down to, well, by a process of elimination, which would be presumably pretty straightforward, no human could have done this. And in my experience, and Stops and yours experience, we've never heard anything remotely like that. Not even, it doesn't even reach like 50% remote. It's just so dismally poor and so vague that you could just kind of laugh it off at the get-go.
Or you have like an example. If I have a disease with me, may Allah forbid, and a doctor comes to me and he established to me with a clear proofs he's a true and an expert, then logic dictates I should believe and follow his advice. Okay? Now Prophet Muhammad.
Okay, so here's an interesting. He reckons that if a doctor came to him, he could do it with clear proofs. If we look back at history, you've had doctors, you've had shaman, you've had all kinds of people claiming that they have solutions, and people have believed them throughout the ages. And on rare occasions, somebody might have got better, but it wasn't necessarily they got better because these guys did something that actually made them better. It's sometimes it's the the effect where the placebo effect, where somebody gets better because you've kind of given them the idea that they ought to get better, and somehow that seems to help them get better, or they would have got better on their own. So this idea that you can establish that a doctor, how do you establish that? If a doctor came to you tomorrow and told you to take this vaccine or to do this, that, and the other, how are you going to establish whether he's pulling the wool over your eyes or whether it's in fact true? You've got no way. So you're going to take it on trust. And that's what people have done for thousands of years with people who claim to be medical experts or whatever the case is. And oftentimes it failed. And when we see things failed and so forth, even these days, people have always got an excuse for it. And it's often that it's never that they are wrong. It's something else that's gone on. Oh, you didn't have faith, or no, there wasn't the right mixture, or there's something going on. So this is an unfalsifiable claim. And this idea of, you knowing whether the doctor's saying something true or false, you're not really going to know that yourself, unless you have background information, in which case you'd have the evidence prior to the person coming there, and then you'd be knowledgeable enough on it. But other than that, you have to take it on trust. And so using this idea of the doctor is a very poor analogy, because you as a layperson can't establish that without background information.
So, but then, Rob, what is your explanation for why we have people today in the 21st century living with us today who are not capable of asking even these very, very simple questions, basic questions?
I just think it's a skill that one has to learn. And I think it's like most people don't go to the gym. And so I think it's the same for the mind. When I used to go to the gym, and I haven't for a while, obviously, because of what's been going on, I'd get into it, and then, I'm used to it and so forth. When you haven't gone for a while and you start to do it, it's painful, it's unpleasant, whatever the case is. But the more you do it, the better you become at it. The same for us, right? Most human beings they're not taught to think like we're trying to think now. Not to say that we're perfect by any stretch, but most human beings are not taught critically.
But you can walk. I mean, I'm talking about the most basic of functions. So it's not even a matter of going to the gym, which is, high level, specialized, whatever. I'm talking about like very basic things like walking. And he is not even using his brain for the most basic of things and saying, okay, you're talking at me, but what is it that you're actually saying that, has any kind of basis? This is the most basic of questions. I'm not asking for a, I don't know, psychologically or philosophical or whatever kind of complex line of reasoning or questioning. I'm just asking for the most basic thing. I mean, he's just standing there, and this is what Nick has just pointed out. It's a couple of minutes, and he's just standing there, completely silent, just absorbing it like a sponge, not doing anything. I mean, even
but
as if
stops.
he's
I
a
think
14-year-old guy, you should have the basics.
no, but I think stops. That's where you overestimate people's abilities. What we've kind of learned to do to whatever level, most people never learn to do, and so we expect it. This is the other side of the Dunning-Kruger. When you have a little bit of expertise in a field, it appears easy to you, and you expect other people to naturally pick this up or to know this, or it should be second nature to them. And of course it's not. And you see this played out many, many times. And so experts will be, and I'm not saying we're experts in the high level sense, but we've done a little bit more than most people. And so to us, this is like second nature. But actually to people like this young fella here, it's not. And so it's not difficult to understand why this happens. It's just that the brain is not being taught, or they haven't had the pull or whatever the case, or had the exposure to learn to do this. And what you and I think are easy is in fact not second nature to most human beings. And we see this time and again in different areas, whatever the case. You and I watch a lot of these, videos where people confront the police and so forth, doing legal actions, and the police brains go into the same sort of poor thinking. So it's ubiquitous among, I would suggest, the vast majority of human beings, that they don't have this ability, and it's not straightforward to them. It's not a natural thing that they're born with, most people anyway. And so it's a skill that needs to be learned. And once you've learned it like you and I have, then it seems like it should be so obvious to everybody else, and it isn't.
So what you're saying is that the majority of the people are more gullible than critical, not even to the...
Yeah.
I'm not talking high level, but even basic level?
Yeah. I mean, you see it in the world today, right? There's people who believe in flat earth, and, maybe they don't want to take the vaccine, whatever it might be, whatever it is. And people really believe this, and they have access to the information even today, and they're not able to differentiate. And if somebody sounds confident, they've run the script like Shamsi has many times, the other sort of hesitancy with somebody that's unsure is A, they've got a camera on them, and B, this person seems to know or sounds like they know what they're talking about. This idea of confidence, certainty in what you're saying is very big. I used to, look into this when I did some of the psychological training, and certainty beats knowledge many times over if the person is very good at articulating what they claim without having good evidence. And somebody who sounds like they're a bit more cautious but has the evidence and so forth will oftentimes not be convincing. It's a fascinating psychological way that this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, I know that in marketing. But the funny thing is, for me, is that intellectual laziness seems to be a huge step up for people to take it, that they feel comfortable in just letting everything sort of run by them without challenging anything. And it seems to be much, much easier to accept the biggest bullshit story than to do any kind of even low-level questioning. And this, for me, is amazing.
But yeah, stops. You just got to remember that there's cults and everything everywhere. Like, this isn't the only way people are getting scammed. There's people getting scammed into Mormonism. There's people getting scammed into Jehovah's Witness things. Then there's people getting scammed into pyramid schemes. So I think you give humanity too much credit. And we're supposed to be intelligent, but I wouldn't say that many people are. Especially a kid like this.
I agree with you, but the consequences are so gigantic. I mean, if I look back 80, 90 years, and I look at human beings, how everybody believed that National Socialism was just another flavor of democracy, and how they were shown that this is a huge mistake, that there were all the indications, all the signs were there, and they just didn't see them, and they didn't realize them, they didn't process them. If we see that the consequences can be so huge, one would expect that, if you see the same sort of indications again, that you start reacting to them. That you can't say to yourself, oh, well, last time we made a mistake, but maybe this time it's going to be okay. Come on, you can't do that. I'm flabbergasted.
lived 1400 years ago. He was well known amongst his nation to be trustworthy, truthful, and honest. 1 minute, yeah? All right. Even there is a non-Muslim historian, I'm coming to you, yeah? There is a non-Muslim historian, look what they said about him. I have studied him, that a wonderful man, and in my opinion, far from being an antichrist. He must be called the savior of humanity. George Bernard Shaw, the Trinity of Islam.
Yeah.
And many people who are non-Muslim.
Rob, just want to point out, I don't even think this kid's like buying any of this bullshit, because he has this look that I did when my dad was trying to teach me chemistry as a kid. Like, he tells me to look at the paper, I look at it. He tells me to nod, I nod. Like, I think he's not buying into. He doesn't understand half the shit that's coming out of this guy's mouth, and the other half he doesn't believe it. But like, yeah, I just think he's like not wanting to get arrested for Islamophobia. So he's not like saying anything and just nodding there.
You'll see at the end, though. We'll see what happens at the end.
You're right.
But even this idea, right? Because you know, I like to take people charitably. I don't know whether this claim from George Bernard Shaw is in fact the case. But I don't care if it is the case, because I want to know why he said it. I don't mind if it was Einstein that said, you know what, this Muhammad can't have been a normal human. He must have been a prophet. I don't care if it was Einstein, the inventor of special relativity, who said it. The important part is, what evidence do you have to support that claim? So him bringing this up, George Bernard Shaw's more modern anyway. He obviously just, all we had to, if we could go back in time and open up the Quran and walk him through it, he'd probably retract it quite quickly if he was an intellectually honest person, which, as far as I know, he was. So he just got, even if, you know, it's him, he's just got sort of brainwashed by this idea as well. So it doesn't matter who the person is. Even the smartest people can make mistakes or get brainwashed. You know, it doesn't mean that they're immune to it. So pointing out this person in modern day, I'm going, well, why would I care what somebody modern day says? What I care about is why they say it. And of course, you know, Shamsi, that there were people at that time who didn't say that Muhammad was this. They said he was a liar, etc., etc. So what do you have to say about that? Because if you're bringing evidence that people at the time said he was wonderful, and in fact, the evidence you brought isn't the person of the time, but somebody more recent, the last couple hundred years, why would I care what somebody in the last couple hundred years said? I care about whether they've got evidence for the claim, in which case it doesn't matter who said it or when.
And by the way, I looked into this and did a little bit of research, and he did not say this.
Okay, well, that's par for the course, right? I want to be charitable, but and you're right, Stops. Maybe it's a case of, you know, having done this, you and I have done this a lot, just denying it up front. I don't believe he said that. Demonstrate that's the case. And of course, all they've got is a pamphlet there, and then they can't do that on the spot, and so then that'll just be a bit of waffle or some sort of tactic there to not have to do that, right? Because they wouldn't be able to do it on the spot. And if they did try to do it on the spot, the problem is, how do you demonstrate on the spot that it's not true? And so,
yeah, true. But you see, this is where this level of skepticism is actually quite healthy, because you don't immediately believe it. I immediately go and look into this, and I say, well, hang on, did he really do this? Just trying to ascertain what is being claimed. So this is something that I would love for everybody else to do.
You can do that. I think you're absolutely right. You're putting an extra burden on yourself there, because then if they are committed to this idea, you say he didn't. Okay, so what's your evidence? And then they start to pick apart your evidence. And if they can find a hole in it, they go, well, your evidence is poor. At no point have they demonstrated that their one is in fact the case. So that's the danger of doing that side. It's good to do that for sure, because then you have the information, but then you've got to be rock solid on it, and it lets them off the hook a little bit. So that's the only downside of doing that, and it's very difficult on the spot. But like you say, after you've done the research, then you've got that information. But I still want them to show that it is true, because I'm going to do the critiquing like they would to yours. If you brought it, we do to theirs, because otherwise they just get let off the hook and they don't have to do that. And they think that if they can find a hole in yours, they will never be intellectually honest to say, even if I found a hole in yours, that doesn't mean that mine is true. They will just somehow want to make it appear as if there's a hole in your thing, if they find that they can, throw doubt on your claims that he didn't say it, well, then that automatically validates that he did. And of course, that's not true either. And so I don't want to let them off the hook with that sort of stuff, but it's good to have as a backup anyway, to go, well, no, it's not. But then the burden becomes yours. And that's something I want us to try not to do when we don't have to, but good to have as a backup.
I wonder if this TDS Dave quote is mine or if this is somebody else.
Oh, I can't see it. Sorry.
Because this 2008 makes sense because that is about the time that I did this.
Muslims, historians, study about his biography with sincerity, and they kept the conclusion this man is an honest man, truthful person. That's the first one. The second one, Prophet Muhammad والسلام, prophesied many things about the future. For example,
okay, so he's going to give us an example now, right? I don't care if the person is the most honest person in the world. All I have to ask a question to any honest Muslim, if there is, I'm sure there are honest Muslims, is can an honest person be wrong? Because the claim is not, from us at least, or unless we know that it is the case, the claim is not that he's dishonest. The claim is that he's mistaken. And you can be honest and mistaken. So I don't have to go down the route or take on an extra burden and go, hang on a moment, I have to prove he's dishonest. No. All I have to question is he mistaken? And unless you can claim or you want to put evidence that an honest person cannot be wrong, which I don't think you can do, then you have to acknowledge that he could be wrong. And so your claim about him being honest isn't that effective or isn't that important to me. Unless there was a claim that, hey, he's dishonest, and then is more likely to be lying. But the honest person can just be mistaken. He can especially be mistaken about, extraordinary or supernatural events, even if he's honest about other things. He can honestly relay something that he thinks is true, but is in fact false. But let's hear the example now, because this is the key part, right? He did all these, predictions and prophecies. And my question is, give me your best one. Give me the one that you think will blow everybody away when they hear it. Because you don't want to listen to 10 of them or whatever the case is. You want the clearest, strongest one possible that is just, incredible. Let's see if he's going to do anything remotely close to that.
for example, he said there will come a time when you see the barefoot Arab man competing in building tall buildings. When the Prophet Muhammad mentioned that, David, back in those days, the Arabs were not known to do that. Those who were known, the Persians, the Romans, Egyptians, the Greeks. Let me ask you, maybe you know.
Okay, so this is the best. We've done this before, and at the risk of repeating ourselves many times, and as for viewers, if you're a viewer and you're listening, think to yourself, what questions might I ask about, barefoot Arabs competing to build tall buildings? So there's a few things that immediately come to mind. What does it mean to be tall? Tall compared to what? Tall compared to a human? Tall compared to a tree? To the Egyptian pyramid? What is tall? And all it says is they're going to compete. So they're competing. They could have been competing from Muhammad's time until now, because we haven't got an establishment of when this is, or where this is, or when they are going to do this. So this is a vague idea that can be brought to bear at any time that these guys want to. And it just so happens at this particular time in the Middle East, in a particular area that isn't even in Saudi Arabia at the moment, although it'll be coming soon. And then listen to the claim then. Then it won't just be in a particular area, but it'll be in Saudi Arabia itself. So the claim will become stronger when suddenly a building appears, as I think it's the Riyadh Tower, or whatever it is that's being built at the moment, becomes the tallest building in the world. But at the moment, it's in the general vicinity, so that's good enough for them. And then it'll become even better than that later on. And so this claim will either be strengthened or weakened, or it will disappear when other buildings come along. But all it says is compete anyway in building them. But what is tall? So there's just so many problems with this vague statement. This shouldn't even remotely impress anybody. And I'm sure the other guys can add to it if they want to.
Can you show me a photo of naked Arabs building this?
Well, this is why the claim is... Is it naked? Is that what he said? I thought he said compete. Barefoot Arabs competing. I thought that was his claim.
Well, in some it says barefoot, and others it says naked.
Okay, well, I mean, we'll just go with whatever the strongest one is then. It doesn't matter, right? Barefoot. I mean, are they barefoot? How many of them are barefoot? And then they'll probably get, what they would do then is appeal to the people who have come from other countries who are so poor that either don't wear shoes or wear poor sandals that are falling apart. But those aren't the Arabs then. So, and again, that's another point. Are the Arabs themselves doing this, or they're getting outside expertise and labor to do it for them? And to what degree are they doing it? So there's so many questions one could ask there that would just, take this apart. If we had to go sit and go through just this one claim alone, these guys would battle to have any substantial answer to any of this. And it would be so easy to put forward a criteria, when it's going to happen, who's going to be doing it, exactly where it's going to happen. None of that's here at all, right? The barefoot Arabs in the sand. Well, how many deserts are there? Arabs could do it in the Sahara Desert. Just so happens they happen to do one now. And this claim is only coming about now. And when a building gets bigger than this somewhere else in the world in some future time, either in China or elsewhere, are they going to stop saying this? Or are they going to, well, they're still competing and still very tall. This sort of thing smacks of being unfalsifiable. When I hear things like this, immediately there's a red flag in my mind. What would need to, and I ask, you see, these are the questions that attempt to get these people to think. What would need to be the case such that you would accept that this prophecy did not come true? Now ask that, and I might have to repeat it because it sounds like, I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. What would need to happen such that you would accept this prophecy is false? See if they can give you a criteria. The brain would not even think of how to do that. And that should tell you a lot.
I just want to push in quickly. This is a comment that was also swallowed by YouTube for some odd reason. I'm trying to find a commonality and I can't see it. And what is more useful actually is this here. This is the real quote. Rob, can you see this? No,
I can't see it.
This is the actual quote is barefoot, naked, destitute sheep herders compete with for tall buildings.
Okay, yeah, that's one interpretation. Again, they might just take another one that's more favorable to whatever their claim is. And we can have a look at whatever the claim is anyway and see whether it stacks up. But as I say, there's just so many things wrong. But that's always a good question to ask somebody. When it smacks to you of this unfalsifiable, ask them what the criteria is that they would accept that if it could be falsified. If they haven't got that and it's as vague as this, let's just move on. This is not even remotely interesting to anybody who's paying attention or using their brain.
Where is the tallest building in the world?
It didn't say the tallest building, did it? But notice what happens here, right? This is post hoc reasoning. This is reasoning backwards to go, here's something. Let me look for something in the world that I can match this to. At no point did it say it's the tallest building. They will compete in tall buildings. And that claim could have been from Muhammad's time on, because what a tall building? It would have been a two-story building. Anything taller than a tent in Saudi Arabia in the 7th century could be considered a tall building. There's no criteria for this, but suddenly it's the tallest building. What will he say when the building is in Riyadh or when another building, right? As long as it's in the Arabian Peninsula, he's gonna take this as the claim until it isn't anymore. Then what are you going to say? Oh, well, now it's just competing because they're still tall buildings. Right, so you'll just shift the goalposts eventually over time if you had to ask this guy again in 10 years when another building comes along. And this is how slippery these guys are. But this is what they're reduced to in order to argue such pitifully poor points. They're reduced to using, these sort of tactics and this sort of claims where, they'll have fallacious reasoning as things change over time.
Dubai is Burj Khalifa. And who's competing with them? Saudi. And how Dubai and Saudi 60 years ago, 70 years ago, it's pure desert, let alone 1400 years ago. So how this man knew? Not randomly, specifically, precisely in details.
Not randomly, specifically, precisely in details. This man's criteria for specifically, precisely in details is so monumentally poor and low. I don't think it could be much lower than this. But that's what these guys are reduced to. To claim that is specific and precise is just so hilariously, laughably wrong and pathetic. It's unbelievable. And yet they say it with a straight face. If they were doing this as comedy, we'd all be laughing along. But they're doing it as if this is supposed to be taken seriously.
Yeah, but this is not supposed to be just a story. This is supposed to be a sign for the end times. Remember,
which of course they never tell
that the end times were just around the corner.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And that's another point that we don't often bring up, is what was the context? Because these guys love using the word context, right? What was the context for this all being said? And if this is the case, and if he knew that this was supposed to be the end times, when is the end times? Is it in your lifetime? Right? These buildings, all these things are happening now that you claim, because that's what it's about. It wasn't prophecies, just random prophecies, supposedly. It was all about the end time. Well, when's the end time? Can you give it criteria? If in 50 years the end time hasn't come, would you deconvert? I guarantee you almost no Muslim would. Why?
But
because it might happen in the future.
50 years ago, the Chrysler Building was inaugurated. It was the tallest. Then it was the Empire State Building. Then it was this. When are you going to stop? When you're going to say, this is now the tall building that we're talking about that was not built by naked, barefoot Arabs, but now why is it that now suddenly, just because it's built somewhere on the Arab Peninsula, now suddenly it's significant? But if it's in KL or something, it doesn't really matter. Or 101 in Taipei. Come on.
Because that's what post hoc reasoning and shifting the goalpost looks like. And that's what they're reduced to, is doing this sort of fallacious reasoning. And then people are just lapping this up instead of, and hopefully we are highlighting this and just peeling this back to show how absurd it is and how weak this argument and claims are.
Except from what? From the Creator. Another one. Prophet, not just one, there's thousands of prophecy. Prophet Muhammad said there will come a time, he said to his companions, his disciples, he said there will come a time you will overpower the Persians and the Romans. The Persians and the Romans back in those days, they were the greatest empires. So Prophet Muhammad, he said to his disciples, you will do it. Historically, is known amongst the Muslims historians and the non-Muslim historians that the Muslims, the Prophet Muhammad disciples, overpower the Persians and the Romans.
So even he didn't do the best job he could, right? But obviously the young man here is not challenging this, but they often claim, and the Quran's supposed to say 3 to 9 years. He didn't even bring that in. He said they'll overpower them. What does overpower them mean? What, 2 people beat up 1 person somewhere in the back street? Was it 500 people that won a single battle when the opponents were asleep? What, you see, this is the vague nonsense that we're hearing. But he says it with such gusto as if this is somehow substantial. And it's less than trivial. It's just amazing that a human brain like this can put this out as if this is a serious prophecy of some sort. And then he's going to turn around in the same breath or the next breath and say this is precise and this is just, it's just so amazing. Nobody could have thought of this. But no criteria is given for this. And when you try and pin them on this, they're like jello. They just slide around it. But when you're asking for the criteria, they don't have it. And something else comes out of the mouth other than criteria because they know they don't have that. And when you point out how pitiful this is, they don't have a substantial response, but they've learned that something comes out of the mouth in response so that it doesn't look as if they're talking utter nonsense, which they are to anybody who's paying attention. But to the gullible followers, some other utterances have to come out of the mouth so it sounds like they're saying something. But that's what happens with brains that aren't paying attention. Shamsi could say anything at this point, and this poor fella and many of the Muslims will just nod along and go, wow.
That's the problem.
It's a deepity, right? That's what the philosopher Dan Dennett says, deepity. Something that sounds profound, but is utterly trivial. And in this case is completely vague.
And even there is an English historian, he said that a prophecy, it was as impossible for it to take place because the Arabs were known to be very simple people. Yeah, prophecy, that's true, barakallah fik. A prophecy means something, we're talking about prediction, like a football or like when a fight took place between, this, it's not a betting shop, you can analyze, no. It's something which everyone's looking at you, are you mad? You telling me this will happen, but it's happening. So again, another prophecy, Prophet Muhammad said, it will come a time when the Muslim will take over Constantinople, David. Do you know Constantinople? No, I don't. Constantinople is Istanbul, Turkey.
Where's this claim? And when did this happen again? Is there any particular time frame? What does it mean to take over this thing? Where's he getting this idea from? I don't think this is in the Quran, so is this somewhere else that this is coming from? And if so, when and how? And none of these questions are asked. But he'll make the claim and it'll sound good to the gullible ear, but the rest of us will go give us the evidence. Where does this come from? What's the criteria for this? How long did this last? And is the prophecy then falsified the moment they lose it? Or is it as long as they can walk in for a day or 2 or a month or a week? How long is it? As long as they defeat the forces for a day, is that considered a prophecy? Surely they would still be in control of it and blah, 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 right? And of course, they weren't and now they are again and goes backwards and forwards. So does the prophecy change over time?
So the Muslims took over Constantinople after Prophet Muhammad passed away 700 years or 800 years. How we knew that? Again, you know what? In the Quran, Allah mentioned the prophecy in the Quran as well. Allah said, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. We have made Quran easy to be memorized. So this verse has been mentioned 1400 years ago. David, this book, it has been memorized by 100 million of people who does not speak the language of the book. That is a miracle. It's like
No, it's not a miracle to memorize a tiny book when it's done from a young age and you are inculcated into it, i.e. you're brainwashed to do it over and over, and in some places you're even beaten for getting it wrong. Then the brain is, and human beings are quite adaptable. They will learn to do something. They won't question it. And in fact, this way of memorizing deletes or circumvents the critical thinking faculties, because now all you're being is a parrot. And if you remember from your days at school, for those of us who did try to learn, all you were doing was learning something so you could regurgitate it, not because you understood it or thought about it or analyzed it or whatever the case is. And this is 100 times more the case with Muslims learning the Quran. So no, it's not spectacular or miraculous or anything like this. Human beings can memorize short books given enough time and enough incentive, either positive or negative, to do so. But then let's open up the book and ask them to start thinking about it. And at that point, you see what happens. There isn't any thinking that's available to critically analyze the book.
And it's not hundreds of millions either.
Yeah. Again, that's just what's the claim for that, right? Where's the evidence of that? Maybe there's 1 million people. Oh, well, that's still a lot, right? So you'll see how it's also the Mott and Bailey doctrine. So if he makes a massive claim and you challenge that, well, sorry, I got that wrong, but it's 1 million. Well, that's amazing. That's still a miracle. Is 10 a miracle? Then, of course, my question is, okay, what constitutes a miracle? How many people need to believe it or memorize it that we could test that you claim it's a miracle? What's the number? And again, he'd have to either give something or he'd babble some other nonsense, but it'll be entirely arbitrary, right? But this is what doesn't happen.
Memorize the Bible.
Yeah, I don't know how many people. I don't know if it's as many as the Quran, but the Quran is much smaller.
No. I think it's 3.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure how many you had. But it's a much smaller
there
book.
Are people who have managed to do that. But we're talking about, 7 or 8 times the amount. I mean, the Quran is very, it's shorter than the New Testament.
Yeah. And if you start at a young age and there's, incentives or punishment for not doing it, then, it's likely that human beings can do this. There's no miracle here. This is easily explainable. Yeah, nothing fantastic about this at all. In fact, it's sad more than anything else. Certainly not miraculous, but very sad.
Like you and I will memorize a book the size of this book in Chinese, but none of us speak Chinese. It doesn't make any sense. You see what I'm saying? And that is the power of miracle. Let me ask you something. David, imagine I say, you know what? I like you, David. I'm going to give you £2 million. It's a gift from me. Just take it. What would you say to me at least? Thank you. Would you remember me all the time?
No, I wouldn't remember you all the time. I'd actually go and put it to good use. But I'd ask you to demonstrate that you actually have the money first. Show me the money. Don't tell me you're going to do it. Show me. If you don't show it, then I'm obviously going to be, what's the word? Critical of your claim that you have it or that you're going to give it to me. When I see it in my bank account, then I'm a bit older, so I don't believe people until, certainly with claims like that, until it's in the bank account and I can verify it. And yes, I'd be grateful and say, thanks very much for that, and I'm going to go and put it to good use. But no, I'm not going to remember you every moment of the day or, prostrate to you or whatever the case is. No, certainly not going to do that. But yes, I'd be grateful.
Would you remember me all the time? Yes, I would. Of course. £2 million? Boy, when you buy a nice house, you remember Shamsi. Okay? But listen to this, David, now. I will give you £2 million on the condition, give me your 2 eyes. Would you do that?
Why would he do that? Why would he do that? I mean, there are some people who would do that. In fact, there's a person I know of who wanted to become blind. Get this, right? There's a person, because I remember the story and it was just so incredible, so that she, because it was a female, could know what it felt like to be like kind of disabled. There's a better word for it, but like in a minority or whatever the case is, right? Wanted to do this for no money other than to have the experience. So she wanted to become blind. I don't know if it ever happened or hopefully she got talked out of it, but you don't even have to have people being paid to do it. Right? But would I do it? No, why would I do that? Get rid of something like money can't, buy you the sight unless you're somebody that's, so delusional that you want to get rid of your eyes for some other reason. And maybe you would. Some people might, right? Think about their family or whatever the case is. There'll be some other reason that they would take the money and give up their eyes. I wouldn't, and my family wouldn't ask me to, and I wouldn't ask them to. Right?
No, go. You say why? Because your 2 eyes are more valuable than £2 million. So why don't we thank and remember the one who gave you 2 eyes for free?
Because you haven't demonstrated that that person gave you those 2 eyes, and if they did, they haven't. I'm wearing glasses, so the eyes that they gave me is not very good anyway, and it could have done much better, right? There's animals out there that can see further, they can see in better darkness, they can see more colors. So there's different animals that whose eyes are far superior to ours. So why am I going to be eternally grateful for these eyes when they could have been so much better, and they're getting poorer as I get older? This smacks to me of a very poor design. So no, I'm not going to be grateful for that.
Yeah, Rob, just to add to that point, the example he chose is to a kid that has glasses on.
I know. Isn't that ironic, right? And because I'm thinking about it now, of course, with my glasses, and obviously the kid, but he's not thinking about that, of course, either. And going, well, hang on a moment, I've got glasses on, so why should I be thankful? I'd be thankful I've perfect sight, and I could live for 1,000 years without disease or needing food or whatever the case is, be strong and fit and see what I could do, Yeah. And hopefully not have, the rest of humanity killed and I'm the only one alive. That I would call out to Allah, or whoever it is, why would you need to kill these people? Give me 1,000 years to see if I can, or indeed give them the opportunity to, to come to see that they were wrong or whatever the case is. But there's just so much wrong with us, isn't there? It's just amazing that he could say this with a straight face.
You see, that's what Allah said in the Quran. Allah said, oh mankind, you and I, not just a Muslim, worship your creator, the one who created you and your forefathers. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned. فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. Which one of you God's favor you are denying? When you look, if someone comes try to kill one of us, we will run away to save our life. So the life that we have is so dear to us. But what about the one who gave it to us for free? Why don't we thank him? That's why Prophet Muhammad said, if you want to appreciate what God has given you, look to those who are below you. Some people cannot walk. Allah already mentioned.
But hang on a moment. This goes against your idea of life being a test. Surely, and this is the question I had the other day, and I just got to bring this in as anecdotal, right? I had this discussion on Discord, happened to pop on the other day, and I asked the Muslims on there, do you believe that the greater the test, the greater the reward? They were like, yeah. And I said to them, well, why aren't you putting yourself under a greater test? And this was fascinating to hear them make excuses for why they can't, they're not able to, they are under a test, whatever, sort of response they could come up with. Just go and do this for the Muslim and ask them this question. Do you believe that the greater the reward, the greater the test? If that's the case, then would you not pray to be disabled? Because if that's a greater test and it's a short period of time in life, then surely you're going to want to have those tests because you're going to have a greater reward in heaven. And so his idea that life is precious, it's a test, and so you don't want to have an easy life by their lights. So all I wanted to point out to these Muslims on Discord, and in fact do this with any Muslim you can speak to, is that they're hypocrites. Because if they wanted to go through a test and there was some criteria for it and they appeal to intuition, then the person, as he said, that's lower presumably is having a greater test and you'll have a greater reward, in which case you should wish that you were of the lowest so that your test is the highest and it lasts only a short time anyway, and then you have the greatest test, the greatest reward.
Now, logical thinking is the Muslim's kryptonite. Come on.
There you go.
It's a test for us, to test us with one another. Some people are poor, but it's a life for you to reflect. To say, look, I'm able to walk, I'm able to see. I should be grateful to my Creator. But now, that's one thing. That's what Islam. Islam.
Just by the way, should the disabled person be grateful as well? Or should the grateful person not be grateful because they don't have 2 legs? Shamsi will say, but hang on, he's got a test as well, like her. And then we go back into this. Either you're grateful because you've got all these wonderful things that you've been given by Allah, or and then you should be grateful. But then you can't ask the person who doesn't have all these wonderful things to be grateful. But then if you try and bring up a test, well, then that goes against the idea of the person that has everything being grateful, because they presumably are going to have a nice life here, but a terrible afterlife, and the reward isn't going to be so good. So whichever way you go with this, you're a catch-22 here. Which one are you going to take? Because you can't have it both ways. You got to select one of these, and if you select one, the other falls. So make your choice here.
The foundation of Islam is a testimony, 2 of them. The first one, to say, oh God, I should appreciate, I accept with my heart, and I profess with my mouth, and I implement with my actions that I should appreciate what you have given me, and I should worship you alone. The second part, how should I worship the Creator? According to my feeling, but your feeling and my feeling are different. So which one is correct? No. That's why the Creator sent the prophets and messengers. We should worship the Creator the way He wants us to worship Him.
And he could have inbuilt that as well, by the way, and that would have been better because everybody would have done it. They would have had a natural disposition, so to speak, like breathing air. If it was second only to breathing air or eating food or drinking water, then everybody would be doing it. But hang on, you need to give them free will. Well, okay, but then why bring a prophet? Because either you can give them the innate ability and they can still decide not to do it, but at least then much more of them would do it and they would do it correctly in the same way. Or you don't want them to really have the correct way because it might interfere with their free will. So again, what's the choice here? Do we have free will, or do you want us, or is there supposedly some sort of contradiction between giving us a much clearer way that everybody can know how to pray no matter where they are in the world, in which case they don't need a messenger, or is that going to take away from free will? And if it is going to take away, so you're giving us a suboptimal method to preserve our free will. And then people do it differently, people will never pray, etc. I mean, is this the best that God can do? That's always my question. Is this the best He can come up with?
Just as if you want to buy a gift for your friend, would you buy a gift that your friend loves or the gift that you love?
Yeah, that my friend loves.
That's what I'm saying. So if you want to worship the Creator, worship the way He loves. That's why the Creator sent the prophets and messengers. Allah sent the Quran that Allah will never punish anyone until the proof has been established upon them. Like if someone never heard about Islam and he dies, on the day of resurrection, Allah will test him, will not punish him directly because he never knew the truth. But if the truth is clear to him and he turns away from it, Allah said, وَمَنْ أَظْلَمُ مِمَّنْ ذُكِّرَ بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِ.
Well, then I think, and we've said this many times, then you shouldn't be doing dawah. Leave it to people to be judged on the day, because then there's much more chance they will accept Allah, because they'll be in the afterlife, there'll be more evidence of Allah rather than this poor apologetics, and then they might accept Allah. But if you do a poor job here and he walks away, okay, he won't because he's not thinking about it, but somebody else walks away, you've condemned them to hell because supposedly they've heard the truth and they've denied it. Whereas it's better if Allah gives them the chance afterwards. He's not going to screw it up like you guys do. So in actual fact, you shouldn't be doing dawah if that's the case.
ثم أعرض عنها إن من المجرمين منتقمون. Allah said, who is more unjust than the one who is reminded with Allah's verses, with Allah's signs, the universal signs and the legislative signs, and he turns away from it as if it doesn't make, like, he doesn't care about it. Allah said, indeed, we will take our revenge from the oppressors. Allah said in the Quran, أَفَنَجْعَلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ كَالْمُجْرِمِينَ. Are we going to make equal those who are righteous to those who are criminals? No. Based upon God's mercy, He created paradise.
Mercy, hang on a moment. Wouldn't you, if you are merciful, surely you'd give them that opportunity. They made mistakes here. They were kind of bad people. But look, it was only a short time. They only affected certain people. And if they say sorry, why don't you send them to heaven? That's what a merciful God might do.
Yeah,
but He's all just.
I would have to say
God
is
contradiction. Go on.
Yeah, I would have to say God is as merciful as this guy here providing the dawah, because that kid's like, bro, shut the hell up so I can get the hell out of here. And this guy's like not letting him go. Like, just the look on the kid's face, it's kind of painful to watch, where he almost feels like he can't interrupt this guy or else this guy will like beat the crap out of him. And I kind of think the kid's
Yeah, I think he's just so enamored with this at the moment. And so he's not thinking at all, but he's just been taken in by Shamsi's words and not actually analysing anything that's being said here.
No, it's not thinking.
But again, but to us it sounds easy, but only because we've been doing it a while, right? If this was your first time you walked past and you didn't know any of this, and this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about, it's very unlikely you're just going to immediately challenge him, right? It's just, and especially if you've got a camera there as well and you're in light and maybe there's other people there and so on, you're going to be far more cautious of doing that.
It's upon God's justice, He created the hellfire. Why? Because imagine like, you're a teacher in university. You have few students working hard day and night, and you have few students, they don't care about university, they don't care about the education. At the end of the year, who you should qualify to pass the study?
But if you're a merciful teacher, you give them another year and ask them again, and you'd keep doing that, because if you were all merciful, there wouldn't be a time where you wouldn't want them to pass and you wouldn't give them another opportunity. You'd be all merciful, which is synonymous in my view with being infinitely merciful, or as much as merciful as you possibly can be. That's what all means, or most merciful. You could not be more merciful. So in that poor analogy again, as a teacher, you would keep giving them the chance over and over and over and over, with the idea that at some point they may well get the message.
If you qualify all of them, that is unjust. You know?
Sorry, say again, Stops?
You don't create students. You don't create students where you know whether they will fail or not. You don't test students on something that you've never taught them. So all this is such a silly argument.
And also, they could work very, very hard and still fail the test. Then it's all been for naught, where they could have partied and done other things. And the students themselves don't know that. So you could have a very hardworking, less bright student who fails after all his hard work. Are you then going to punish him, especially if he shows you all of the hard work that he's done? Or are you going to be merciful and say, yes, okay, you worked this hard. Okay, but why not do it for the other students? Maybe their brains haven't developed enough to recognize how important it is to pass the test. Surely you're going to give them another chance. At least that's what a merciful teacher might do. Well, it's certainly an all merciful teacher would be guaranteed to do that. They wouldn't punish them on the first try. That would be justice and not mercy.
That's why the Creator is the most just. That's why He will also follow His teaching, because already clarified to us, this life is a test. This life is like a bridge. If the bridge has been used to cross from one side to the other side, you don't build a house on the bridge. Yes, David? What do you think what I said so far to you?
You've said so much nonsense and so many bad things. It's hard. I mean, we've gone through it, and we're only 10 minutes 39 in here, and we've been going for 55 odd minutes. I know it's most of me being speaking. This shouldn't convince a child.
This isn't even convincing a child. This is forcing a child into this cult, essentially.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's a logical, rational argument. That's what.
See, and that's unfortunately is this young man's problem, right? It makes sense, but that's only because you haven't engaged your brain to ask many of these questions. And it's, in a sense, it's not your fault. And this is not, talking down to somebody. It's just like, it's a learned skill, whatever it is. There's so many different skills in the world. It's a learned skill. And if he stood next to me, this young man, and I asked these questions, and at the end, I asked him, David, what do you think? Do you think this makes sense now? The only way he could make sense, it could say yes, like he did there, is if he wasn't paying attention at all and only listened to Shamsi, never heard a word out of my mouth, or he's completely irrational. So that's what needs to happen. I'd love to have somebody like a David there, and Shamsi and I have this conversation, and I ask these questions, and then we say, hey, David, here's what you might ask. Do this. Do you think now he's provided a substantial response, or this is all logical or makes sense, or you think is good reason to be true? If David still said yes, then I'd be going, either he hasn't heard a word I've said, or he just can't tell the difference between bunk and critique.
And then he deserves it.
Yeah, I suppose.
In the Quran, Allah always tell us to use our intellect, to use our brain. If it makes sense to you, I'm inviting you to Islam.
Okay, but how did you establish it makes sense? So what we used to do in coaching and so forth is we'd run a scenario after we'd help people and say, and we'd run all these things and say, okay, but now you're gonna be doubtful, you're gonna go home, you're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and you put them in the position of how they might end up feeling or thinking about it afterwards, because they'll feel good in the moment, but then the doubts set in afterwards. And so you'd run the scenario ahead of time so that you could predict what they might do or say or think or they might tell you, so that you can help them overcome those difficulties later on. At no point does he do this. Or if I was Shamsi and he was intellectually honest, David, okay, I've given you all of this. What I'd like you to do now, David, is take this book, go and read this, look at the critics, speak to critics out there, go and see people who have studied this and don't believe what I believe. Go and read their things, come back to me with your questions, let's do that. Or indeed, bring somebody that you think is a critic and stand and watch so that you can see, and I'll show you that I have the answers, or at least Allah has given the answers and I can articulate them. That's what I'd like you to do before you do this, David, because I think reading the Quran, getting a different perspective and listening to people who are critics of this is a worthwhile endeavor, so that you are sure before you take the Shahada that in fact you understand it and you've seen both perspectives. That's what I would do if I was an intellectually honest Muslim who wanted somebody to think about this and use their intellect, as he quite honestly put there. But what do we hear instead? Don't do any of that. Just my monologuing and you just nodding along. I'd like you to take the Shahada now, even though you thought about this. In fact, you haven't asked a single question. My first thing is, but David, I've said all of these things to you. Have you got no questions? Is there anything you want to critique or ask me? None of that, right? Straight into, I'm inviting you into Islam. What can we say?
And I'll tell you, you know what? There's something which is nothing guaranteed in this life. Except what? Death. How many people won't sleep? They never wake up. How many people left their houses? They never come
Well,
back.
Rob, I got a challenge here for this guy. There's one other thing that's guaranteed. This guy's dawah is always guaranteed for us.
Yeah, well, he's always going to do that for sure. But now, instead of doing what I suggested an intellectually honest Muslim would do if they really wanted somebody to study this and think about this and come to it from a well thought out position and having heard, the other side of it, instead of doing that, now I'm going to give you the guilt factor. Hey, you might not wake up tomorrow. Now's the time. If you leave it too long, something might happen and it might not work out for you. Let me give you the emotional argument now to help push you. If you're not sure, let's do this because, hey, you might not wake up. You might get hit by a bus. Let me provide all of this as an additional incentive to help you make the choice now. This is like a salesperson. Somebody who's good at selling won't let you put the phone down until they've done it, right? If you go watch The Wolf of Wall Street and he taught like a system, and if you go watch the movie, he taught Leonardo DiCaprio how to do that call when he went into that penny stock outfit. He did that call. Apparently it took him 3 months to teach him how to do that. You don't put the phone down until the man makes a commitment, and you challenge every single objection or excuse that he's going to come up with. If the man says he thinks about it, you put the phone down, you've lost it. That's as good as somebody saying no. And I've experienced that myself when I've tried to offer people something that I think is really valuable to them. And they say, I think about it. Nobody's ever come back and said, you know what, I've thought about it. And you're absolutely right. If you don't help them make the decision on the phone and overcome their objections, they won't do it. And he's doing exactly the same thing here, right? This is an extra push in case he's not sure, instead of asking him to evaluate it honestly and take his time and read the Quran, etc.
Yeah, it's just sales pitch, exactly. Okay, guys,
Correct.
we've reached the 2-hour mark, but I don't think it's worth keeping a couple of minutes. How much longer is this?
Another 6 minutes.
Okay, I don't think there's going to be so much more information. We're just going to run through it. I hope you're not going to be angry with us if we continue through the video and not keep this for next week.
Yeah, do you want to continue it? I won't
Yeah.
stop it as often now. Stops if you
Yeah.
like. Okay, let's continue on then.
But that's what Allah said in the Quran. قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون. Oh Muhammad, save the people. The death that try to run away from surely will meet you, and you will return to your Lord, and your Lord will inform you of that which you used to do. So if you die and you die upon disbelief, meaning turn away from your Creator, don't blame no one except yourself, because within you, naturally, I should worship my Creator. Just as an example of £2 million. So what is stopping you to accept Islam? To have connection with your Creator. You don't have to be scholar in Islam. As long as the foundation is clear. Yeah. Say? Yeah. Like what is the Shahadatan? Yeah. The testimony, like people think, when I become Muslim, do I have to fly? Do I have to change my passport? No. Meaning, the Shahadatan, as I was telling you, David, the first part, what is the first part? It's carefully, David, yeah? That's the first part. The first part, which is Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, meaning that, oh God, I bear witness that I should worship you alone without any partners. The second part, Muhammad, the messenger of Allah. I should worship you according to his prophet Muhammad. So you believe there's only one God, okay? You believe in his messengers, Moses, Abraham, Noah, Jacob, Isaac, Muhammad. But none of them, you should not worship none of them. They were just a people who God chose and to teach us how to worship God. You believe that God gave a books to the prophets and messengers in order to guide us. Likewise, you believe in the day of judgment, that one day you're going to die and God will judge according to your action. And also, whatever takes place in this universe takes place by God's permission. And then the actions, you pray, you fast. But again, I always say this statement to the people. Imagine someone give you a whole cake and you eat all of it at one time. What will happen to you? Sick. Or you vomit. In order for you to feel the sweetness of the cake, what do you do? In order for you to feel the sweetness of the cake, how do you eat it? Bit by bit.
Okay, but if we're going to use that analogy, I mean, there's so many, I let that thing run for a while there. But if we're going to use this analogy of the cake, then surely using that same analogy, he should go and read the Quran. He should come back with questions, go read the Quran, hear critics, bring back what critics say, Shamsi, to answer it, to use the analogy. That would be intellectually honest way of making this thing. In other words, the example you're giving with the cake goes contrary to your idea that he should take the shahada now, because that's taking the whole cake now. No, Shamsi will say, that's not what I mean by that. I mean that he should take the shahada, so he should gobble down the cake or part of the cake now, and then he should go and look at the recipe to see whether the cake was poisoned or not after he's taken the cake. No, that's not the way to do it. So again, this is just like, sales tactics to try and get him to do it. But the analogy, I would argue, goes against his whole claim of doing this. He should, in fact, be telling him to go and look up the Quran and read it and understand it and come with questions.
It's not like this. The foundation, step by step.
Oh, and the other quick thing I was going to say is also, look how easy it is to get in, right? You only have to do these couple of things. It's made super easy to get in. But then when you get out, right? Oh, you didn't study this. You didn't understand Arabic. Let me test you on all of it. Well, you didn't pass my test, my subjective test about the things you didn't understand about Islam. So you couldn't have been a proper Muslim. But hey, it's easy enough to become one. Don't read the Quran. Just take, the street dawah sales pitch here in 13 minutes and just accept it by saying a couple of things. There you go. You get hugged by all the brothers. You feel great. And there you go. You're into the cult. Easy in, hard out. And no critical thinking to start with.
Submission. Jesus was a Muslim. Abraham was a Muslim. Submit to me. The Prophet said, if someone becomes Muslim, Prophet Muhammad, who doesn't speak his own desire, speak what God told him. He said, when someone becomes a Muslim.
Sorry?
This is bad quality audio. I can barely hear him.
Let me slow down. I was at a 1.25 to get through it a bit quicker.
No, even on 1.25.
Okay.
I mean, this is the same thing, Rob. All he's doing is, if you sign here now, I'll give you another extra 2%, or I'll throw in the prayer rug.
Yeah. So analogies, this is all to try and get the person over the line, right? That's essentially what's happening here now.
Become a Muslim, all his sins is forgiven. You become like a newborn. However, again, shows you what the justice of Islam. If you took people's money, give it back to them. But whatever between the Creator is forgiven. Does it make sense to you?
It does make
It's
sense.
clear to you.
It's clear.
You want to become Muslim?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's logical.
Okay. I'm going to tell you, say in Arabic, then English. Say Ash.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they're going to do the
Pause it
shahada
right
now.
here.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to. Do you want to say something there, Nick?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, this guy's like talking like you guys mentioned, a used car salesman. He's like, he's signed for $1,400 right now. I'll give it to you right now. Just sign here. And
Yeah.
if this guy had a little bit of Indian in him or bargaining skills, he'd been like, hold on, brother, give me the things. Let's do the math right now, and actually like pull up his phone to do the calculation. But this guy's sales pitch just reminds me of used car salesman.
But do you notice as well that David never asked a single question in 14 minutes? Not one question in 14 minutes.
Sad.
Astonishing, right? We'll just get to the end of the shahada very quickly. We don't need all of that, but I just want to see if they're hugging him, right?
The only brothers here, man, they're going to hug you, congratulate you.
See, but this, of course, is well practiced over 1,400 years. I think we can stop it there, so I don't think we need to go on, right? So that's kind of the end of it there. But notice how because what happens after that, people get, in sales, they get what's the term called? It's like cold feet, right? It's buyer's remorse is the term. And so one of the ways is to cement it in is this sort of emotional thing. You did the right choice. People will say that, right? Whenever you bought something, when I buy something online, if I buy something online, especially if it's a digital product that I want to learn something, if the sales process is really good, I'll get a congratulations afterwards, cementing my decision. And that's exactly what we see here. This is a sales process, nothing more, nothing less. At no point is he asked to actually evaluate this other than a cursory, does this make sense? And because David never asked a single question, and his brain wasn't engaged there, it seemed to make sense to him. So he's obviously somebody that's walked past, has not heard much about Islam or whatever the case is, or is already, leaning in that direction. But the fact he never asked any question, I think, is the biggest factor for me that, he really should have done that, or at least had somebody else there to ask those questions. it's a shame that somebody like him doesn't come to Speaker's Corner, and then one of us wasn't there speaking to Shamsi, and then see whether it's as straightforward as he seemed there.
I
and
was
maybe
thinking exactly
he'll learn.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Because then he's go, oh wow, I never thought of that. I never thought of it. And that's cool, right? I'm not blaming him for not thinking about it in the sense that most people aren't practiced at this. What I am potentially pointing the finger at is that he made that decision so quickly, and again, very young, right? So he wasn't even aware probably that it's a sales process. But have some caution around these sort of things. Why is it that most people aren't Muslims, right? Is it because it all makes sense and they're just denying it? Or is there something that he's missing that this guy isn't telling him that might be a reason to be cautious of accepting this as being true?
This is my old analogy when I come up with I'm the car mechanic and just looking at a car and I've just determined that this is a lemon. And then the car salesman comes up and tells this lady, yeah, this was an old grandmother driving this car. This is in perfect condition. It was really great. And then you, as the mechanic, you have to decide: are you going to pipe up, or are you just going to let them walk into this? And this is exactly the situation that I see myself in Speaker's Corner, when these guys promise the world, and all you need to do is either you ask them, is this really true? Ask him for evidence, ask them for this, or do you just keep quiet and let them go into the Shahada? This is up to you.
There we go. So hopefully that's been somewhat entertaining, educational, etc. I won't say any more. I've spoken the majority of the time. I'll leave it to my colleagues to kind of wrap it up there.
No, that's it. It's perfect. No, if there would have been anything to add, I would have said so. No, but I think you did it perfectly. Okay, let's go for our show, for our closing, by Ibn Majah this time. And I don't know why I picked this one up. I thought this was so bizarre. The Messenger of Allah said, the urine of a boy should be sprinkled over, and the urine of a girl should be washed.
What's the obsession with urine here?
I tell you, these guys are not well, really. And this is graded Sahih. Okay, so this is authentic. It's the highest grade that you can get. I don't understand. I don't get what these things are. I don't understand why people spend time writing these things down, and why is the urine of a boy different than that of a girl, and what?
Yeah.
All right, ladies, gentlemen, others, I hope you've enjoyed the Gin and Tonic show on the 21st of May, and we shall see each other again next week on Friday. And if you feel like it, come and join us on the Discord channel. If you want to discuss something, if it's not enough Islam for you, come and join us. We'll see you there. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on Friday, same time, same channel, same everything. If you want to say something, if you want to comment something, please feel free to do so. If you want to ask a question, go ahead. If you want to ask for any kind of a critique or any kind of a review or anything, please go ahead, let us know, and we'll try and accommodate it. If you know a Muslim who wants to join us, please tell them where to find us. Otherwise, if on your way out you would give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down, that would be great. See you next week. Good night. Good night, Mr. Rob Speakers. Good night, Mr. Nick of Time. Any last comments from you?
No. I'm happy to be here.
Great stuff.
Thank you, guys. That was hopefully entertaining and educational, and we'll see you again next week.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Good job. And people in the chat, thank you very much for spending time with us. It's very much appreciated. It's good to see that you are commenting, that you're asking. Very nicely done. Thank you. See you next week.